Dr. Schlitz, do you agree with Alva Noe that consciousness extends outside the confines of our skull?
I do. I mean, I think that consciousness is both a process, and it involves outcomes, and it also involves perspective. So it's a kind of multifactorial construct. And so when we hold it that way, we recognize that, you know, it is mediated through various means, through language or our sociability or the nurturing we get from a parent. We can see it from different perspectives, you know, the watcher concept, but it's also possible that there's the slime mold perspective. And so recognizing that as we want to operationalize this notion of consciousness, that, you know, it means different things, and that in fact this moment we're in right now, the fact that we have the liberation of asking these questions, how do we approach consciousness from a scientific perspective, has basically been a taboo topic for hundreds of years, from the time that Descartes made a political deal with the church to say scientists can deal with the objective material aspects of reality, but the church, or the church, it was the church, the Catholic Church at that time, who really had control over inner experience and subjectivity. And so it really is very recent that scientists have been able to ask these questions, let alone come up with answers to them. But in thinking about how I define consciousness, I tend to think about it as a nested set of relationships. So there's that consciousness within us. When our biology is functioning perfectly, it is correcting and calibrating and bringing awareness to what needs to happen inside our biology to begin to self-correct. I think it's also something that is embedded in the intersubjective, that engagement within each other. So any content of my experience comes because I'm a product of my culture, my relationships, my family, and that there are ways in which we bring things like intent to these relationships and shape other people's consciousness. So we're embedded in that way. I think it's also the sense of being embedded in environment. And so we are co-participants in the conscious unfolding of nature. All you have to do is be in a rainforest and watch how it calibrates and organizes for higher levels of complexity to know that slime molds probably do have a role to play in that. And then I want to speak directly to your question, which is consciousness something that, you know, is simply an epiphenomenon of the brain, a byproduct of brain activity, or is it something that has these kind of transpersonal qualities that the mystics talk about? Is it something that can extend beyond, in which case it is our relationship to the broader environment and that sense of engagement in these kind of transpersonal qualities that the mystics talk about?
Well, let me quote from your book. I was reading Living Deeply. And you said...
Congratulations, I approve of that.
I was reading all your books at once, and there were a lot of... You guys all contradicted each other, so I'm going to try to get you fighting now. You said, noetic refers to knowledge that comes to us directly through our subjective experiences or inner authority. This type of knowledge might take the form of an intuition that helps you guide your decisions, an epiphany that leads you to a creative breakthrough. Moreover, noetic experiences often carry unusual levels of authority that can help guide you to new understandings and new ways of being. Now, Robert Burton's book seems a direct challenge to the notion that such epiphanies, though personally transformative, tell us anything about reality. Am I mistaken in that, Dr. Burton?
Actually, what I wrote in my book was... That way, is that better? Okay. Basically, I was commenting that unconscious thought, which is the majority of what we do, in our brains is determined to have some degree of relevancy. In other words, if I look out here and look at a face, I might recognize it, might not. The higher the degree of likelihood that it's somebody I know, the more likely I am to think that's Joe Blow. And these calculations of the likelihood that you're being right appear to you as a set of feelings. The feelings are feelings of knowing or feelings of conviction. And it's become very popular to talk about intuition as a form of knowledge. It is a form of speculation, which you then look at to see if it's really knowledge. Notice we all have gut feelings, and that's how the brain works. It has all kinds of ideas all the time, most of which we don't really even consider But the higher the degree of likelihood that your unconscious thinks it's right, the more likely it is to come into consciousness. So you have an idea that's Joe Blow, and I give it a 90% certainty. So you say, hi Joe. And he says, who are you? And you go, whoops, it was wrong. And in that case, the feeling of knowing was erroneous. The trouble is, we can't determine when the feeling of knowing is correct and when it isn't, unless of course you're Malcolm Gladwell. And for 40 years, I probably